This is an A-10 Thunderbolt attack plane. In the war against Iraq, planes like these worked with deadly effectiveness. Its 30-millimeter Gatling gun fires 4,000 rounds a minute. Its wings can be loaded with a wide variety of bombs and missiles. A-10s have the mission of providing close air support, which means they're specially designed to attack ground targets. During the war against Iraq, these planes destroyed Iraqi tanks, air defenses, and Scud missiles. With an estimated 100,000 Iraqi soldiers dead and most of Iraq's offensive weapons destroyed, Iraq is not likely to be attacking its neighbors. But did all this destruction increase the possibilities of peace in the Middle East? This week, America's Defense Monitor looks at the Middle East in the aftermath of the war against Iraq. America's Defense Monitor. A weekly program on the military and international affairs that affect you, your family, and people throughout the world. Here is your host, Admiral Gene LaRocque.
Welcome once again to America's Defense Monitor. Well, the shooting has stopped in Iraq, the dead have been buried, the troops have returned to their barracks, and the parades are all over. The costs are not all in yet, but it is time to make an appraisal, a calm, objective appraisal as to what we accomplished by that massive effort against Iraq. We need that experience and that appraisal to determine what our course of action will be in the future, whether or not we are willing again to embark on this kind of a venture in a third world country. I think you'll find the program interesting.
Earlier this week, I set out the key reasons why we're here, making a stand in defense of peace and freedom. And we're here to protect freedom, here to protect the future, and here to protect innocent lives. Second, protecting our future means protecting our national security and the stability and security of the Gulf area that is so vital to all nations.
With the war over and Kuwait liberated, has the war helped make the Middle East more stable?
Well, I think that the war sent a lesson not only to states in the Middle East, but to states around the world. This type of aggressive behavior may end up wreaking havoc on one's own society.
Marvin Feuerwerger is a scholar at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. He served in the Defense and State Departments and still consults for the Pentagon.
Well, certainly the war has had some positive impact in the region in removing the major near-term threat posed by Iraq's conventional military capability, much as the result of the Iran-Iraq war removed the near-term threat of potential Iranian aggression. But the war, of course, did not erase many other causes of instability in the Middle East.
I think that the political landscape in the Middle East has changed, but not necessarily for the better.
Between 1966 and 1978, Shireen Hunter was a member of the Iranian Foreign Service. Today, she is the Deputy Director of Middle East Studies at the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
I think that what the war has done, it seems to me, has brought to the fore more than ever before some of the underlying problems of the region, from ethnic divisions, sectarian animosities, quarrel about historical borders, as well as more recent phenomena such as popular demand for more political participation, and obviously created new problems such as environmental problems that do have political dimensions.
There are many ways to think about the war with Iraq. While the administration's primary declared objective was to liberate Kuwait, the actual conduct of the war after January 16th suggests that the principal war aim was to destroy Iraq's military power.
Some thought that if Iraq simply withdrew from Kuwait, that would be sufficient. Others felt that Iraq's military capability had to be reduced significantly. Once the war began, this disagreement disappeared, and it clearly became an objective of the coalition to reduce Iraq's capability to do mischief, and in addition to reduce its capability to resist when the assault would come.
Was that part of the U.S. war goals, to destroy Iraq?
I think that was the sole war goal.
Not the liberation of Kuwait.
I think that was secondary. It was the destruction of Iraq.
Former U.S. Ambassador to Saudi Arabia, James Akins, also held posts in Iraq and Iran during his more than 20 years as a Foreign Service officer.
What is Kuwait, really? It was a sheikhdom whose oil we didn't really need. We did say that we feared the concentration of all of the oil wealth of Kuwait added to the oil wealth of Iraq. But if they're selling no oil, then they have no wealth. No, the main purpose, I think, became very clear after the bombing started. That was the destruction of the infrastructure of Iraq. And that was done brilliantly.
David Sheffer is an international lawyer and a senior associate at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace.
The United Nations sent a special team into Iraq in February or March to examine the damage inflicted upon Iraq by the U.S. bombing raids and the coalition bombing raids. Their report was that the coalition bombed Iraq back to the pre-industrial age. A lot of damage to electrical power generating stations, which have an impact on control of sanitation and water supplies, because those depend upon electricity.
According to a recently returned Harvard medical team, at least 170,000 Iraqi children will probably die in the coming year from typhoid, cholera, malnutrition, and other health problems as a result of the delayed effects of attacks on Iraqi civil and economic targets. The success of the American-led military campaign indicates that Iraq's offensive military capability may have been greatly reduced. According to recent intelligence estimates of the forces in southern Iraq and Kuwait, 85% of Iraq's tanks were destroyed, along with 50% of Iraqi armored personnel carriers and almost 90% of Iraq's total artillery. Despite such destruction, the Iraqi army was still able to brutally suppress the Kurdish and Shia uprisings. Over 2 million refugees fled into Turkey and Iran. The continuing threat of reprisals by the Iraqi military has slowed the return of refugees to their homes and complicated efforts to withdraw American, French, and British troops from northern Iraq. Events since the war's end haven't convinced the countries in the region that the future will be much different from the past.
I think that obviously the military still is a potent force against the Iraqi people, Iraqi dissidents, and even potentially against some of Iraq's neighbors.
Well, they were reduced very much, but not demolished. I think there is still a big threat over there.
Rear Admiral Abraham Ben-Shoshan was Commander-in-Chief of the Israeli Navy from 1985 to 1989. He is currently the military attaché for Israel in Washington.
Maybe it's not there anymore as it used to be, but it's still, in some combination in our area, it can be a threat.
For some in the Middle East, Iraq's attack on Kuwait has increased fears about the neighbors next door.
It's quite obvious that the unexpected could happen.
Sheikh Saud Nasser al-Sabah is the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States.
What happened with regard to the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq was completely unexpected by everyone. And we have to make sure that this never ever happens again, whether it's from Iraq or anybody else.
For both Israel and Kuwait, the reduction of Iraq's military power has not dispelled the notion that future threats may come from any direction.
Most hostile and close enemy we have to our country is Syria. And Syria has a remarkable large force and I would say in size very big. They don't have to call any reserves any day just to carry out an attack if they want to. In my view, this is a real threat there that would have to cope with that every day, every minute, and to be ready for that.
The eagerness with which Middle Eastern countries have lined up to buy huge amounts of weapons seems to confirm that the war has done little to make the region more stable.
What has driven the purchase of arms has been their own sense of insecurity, their own felt need to build military establishments to fight the next war, because they know the next war is coming.
During the past decade, the Middle East has been the top market for arms in the Third World. The 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, the United States, the Soviet Union, China, Great Britain, and France, have been responsible for supplying over 80% of these weapons. With the impressive display of American and European weapons during the war, the countries of the region believe the answer to their fears lies in new purchases of high-tech weapons. The United States is considering the sale of almost $20 billion in new arms to some of the nations that assisted in Operation Desert Storm: Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Egypt, and Turkey.
For a small nation like Kuwait, we need the best, and we need the equipment that's up to date. The limited human resources we have in Kuwait, we have to have the best and the most sophisticated equipment.
But can new rounds of arms sales bring security to countries like Kuwait? Or will they arm the next aggressor in the region? Marvin Feuerwerger believes that the impact of further arms sales depends upon what kinds of weapons are sold in the region.
The procurement of purely defensive Patriot missile systems against the threat of missiles, I think that this can help to reduce the prospect for war and to enhance security. To the extent that countries build new offensive capabilities which can endanger their neighbors, for example, in the acquisition of tactical ballistic missiles or cruise missiles or other systems which enhance the accuracy of offensive weaponry, they can be extremely destabilizing.
Many weapons, however, such as aircraft and tanks, can be used both offensively and defensively. Ambassador Akins believes it's wiser to ban arms sales altogether.
Well, look at the sales we've made to Saudi Arabia already. The billions, the scores of billions of dollars. And yet the Saudi ambassador has said that if Iraq had moved across the Saudi border, they could have been in Riyadh, the capital, or in Dhahran, the oil capital, within 3 days. And what good is this extraordinary military expenditure? And how will the new expenditures of 20-odd billion going to change this equation? Are they going to make Saudi Arabia really secure in itself?
While it may be unclear how much security can be purchased with further arms sales, most observers agree that the days of wide-open marketing of weapons to the Middle East will have to end if the area is to remain at peace. Congressman David Obey is the influential chairman of the House Foreign Operations Subcommittee.
We should make doggone sure that tomorrow is different than yesterday in that region. We had 10 witnesses appear before our committee of widely varying political persuasions. Every single one without question said the #1 goal in the Gulf ought to be arms restraint and arms denial.
If we succeed in cutting off or cutting down arms sales to the region, how can we guarantee the security of friends like Israel and Saudi Arabia?
Well, first of all, I would say that we just assured their security. We sent our troops, over 500,000 of them, to make sure that they were secure. Saudi Arabia might not even exist today if it hadn't been for that.
While planning to sell weapons to those Middle Eastern countries that cooperated with Washington during the war, the Bush administration has also announced an arms control initiative for the region. In the short term, the plan calls for a ban on the production and purchase of material for use in nuclear weapons, leading to an eventual ban on all weapons of mass destruction, nuclear and chemical. The plan also calls for a ban on the most dangerous conventional weapons. As Admiral Ben Shoshan explains, Israel welcomes restraints on conventional weapons.
We don't have the ability to compete and to spend money on defenses the other countries have. We don't have the resources. We don't have oil, and we don't have the, I would say, the joint group of countries that can expend and spend so much money on military. We are a small country with very limited resources.
For Arab states, Israel's possession of nuclear weapons has provided a justification for buying massive amounts of conventional weapons and trying to develop nuclear weapons. The question is, does it make sense to rearm some countries while also supporting arms control in the region? In his post-war address to Congress, President Bush outlined the need for governments in the region to create their own shared security arrangements in the Middle East. The Kuwaiti invitation for Egyptian troops to be stationed in Kuwait may offer some degree of reassurance. But at least for the near future, some believe that the United States will remain heavily involved with military forces in the region.
I believe it's important that if we are pre-positioning and we have naval facilities and joint exercises, there's going to be presence of foreign forces in Kuwait, whether it's from the U.S. or British, together with our forces in providing the training needed.
To Shireen Hunter, the presence of U.S. forces, if long-term, could create problems for the West.
The history of basing by the great powers and military presence has shown that often this becomes a kind of a lightning rod for all sorts of radical and other forces in the region. So I believe that in the long run, it would be much better if the security arrangement there would be one of more multilateral nature, and probably also perhaps even with the involvement of United Nations and others.
Multinational agreements would also make it less likely that the United States will repeat the mistakes of the Cold War by throwing all its support behind so-called regional pillars.
There was a time that there was no other choice but to make better use of regional countries who were friendly to the United States and were also willing to take on security responsibilities for their region. For a long time, Iran performed that role, Iran under the Shah, and then later on Saudi Arabia as a kind of a second pillar. But the pillar theory has some basic flaws. Most of these regional countries have very serious internal problems, and that there is this danger that the pillar will become rotten from inside and will fall. And this is obviously what happened with Iran under the Shah. You had revolution.
According to published reports, American military officials are interested in storing equipment for aircraft and for one division in Saudi Arabia. A forward headquarters for the United States Central Command may be based in the United Arab Emirates or Bahrain, and U.S. Air Force units and ground troops will probably be rotated into the region for periods of training and exercises with local forces. For Ambassador al-Sabah, the short-term necessity of having foreign troops on Kuwaiti soil could give way in the future to a regional security structure.
We are talking with the Iranians, and we hope that the Iranians will see eye to eye with us with regard to finding some kind of arrangement for the security of the region. Obviously, it's still premature to talk with Iraq with regard to this issue, but we hope in the future Iraq will be part of such any arrangement under a new regime.
In the long term, the only way you can create a security in that region is that to create such an intricate relationship of mutual interest between the bigger powers in the region and the smaller countries, that the big power would not want to harm the smaller countries because its own interest would be also endangered. It seems to me to have a security in the Persian Gulf without Iran or Iraq would be to have security in Europe without Germany. It just doesn't make sense.
But if efforts to negotiate arms control and regional arrangements are to be successful, progress has to be made in resolving the many underlying problems of the Middle East. As Ambassador Akins points out, the war has aggravated some old conflicts. For example, because of the disagreement between Saudi Arabia and Yemen on how to get Iraq out of Kuwait, the Saudis expelled at least 800,000 Yemenis from Saudi Arabia.
And I guarantee you that the expulsion from Saudi Arabia is going to be remembered in Yemen for at least as long as the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq. In fact, I think the seeds of a new war have been sown there.
Before the war broke out, numerous witnesses testified before Congress that these problems would not be solved by going to war. Admiral William Crowe was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the Reagan administration.
Put bluntly, Saddam's departure or any other single act, I'm afraid, will not make everything wonderful. In fact, a close look at the Middle East is rather depressing. While we may wish it otherwise, the fact is that the region has been, is, and will be for the foreseeable future plagued with a host of problems, tensions, enmities, and disagreements.
The dispute that has attracted the most attention since the end of the war is among Israel, the Palestinians, and Arab countries. Despite numerous trips to the region, Secretary of State Baker has been unable to make any significant progress. The tacit wartime cooperation between Israel and those Arab countries that fought Iraq so far has not changed most old attitudes.
To be honest, I would say there are perceptions and there is reality. There are wishful thinking and there is reality. And I would suggest to ourselves and to everyone that lives in the area to look in reality and to see if there is any real change in the Arab world. And I haven't seen it.
One area among many that fuels Arab skepticism about Israel's willingness to reach an agreement is the continued building of Israeli settlements on the West Bank. And Israeli skepticism about Arab intentions is fueled by the continuing Arab hostility toward Israel.
I know that there are many Arab countries that we don't have any dispute with them. They could come and stop boycotting Israel, taking off all the restrictions, even, announcing no hostilities anymore, and sitting down and talking, just talking, nothing else. That will be a signal to the countries that have a dispute with us that to talk with Israel is okay.
On the other hand, the war has made Kuwait do some rethinking.
Quite personally, I have not really understood what the whole issue of the boycott is, because while there are a number of companies who've been on the boycott list, I see many other companies working and rendering services to Israel, and at the same time they're not on the boycott list. So the decision to place companies on the boycott list and to remove them has been within an exclusive club of people who decide whether this company should be on or should be off the boycott list. And this whole procedure has to be revised. And I see personally no reason whatsoever to continue with this, because it's not contributing to the stability of our region.
An Arab-Israeli peace is essential to security in the Middle East. There will be no peace in the Middle East unless there's an Arab-Israeli settlement of the Arab-Israeli conflict. The solution is, I think, is fairly obvious to everybody who works on the problem. It's that there has to be a Palestinian state on the West Bank and Gaza, totally demilitarized, of course, and the Palestinians have already accepted that because Israel's, if not security needs, security obsessions have to be addressed.
The war has also done little to ease the tensions that have surfaced as Middle East states cope with modernization. Dr. Phoebe Marr is a respected specialist on Iraq at the Pentagon's National Defense University.
The countries of the Gulf, along with others in the Middle East, are undergoing accelerated population growth, expected to double their populations by the year 2010. Iran, for example, will have over 100 million in that year. Iraq, 35. Oman and Yemen will also be affected. In the near term, at the same time, there's likely to be less revenue. The costs of war reconstruction, added to the residual costs of the 8-year Iran-Iraq war, are astronomical. Once Kuwait and Iraq resume oil production, oil revenues are likely to be lower rather than higher. This will leave fewer funds to cushion the effects of population growth and social change.
Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, traditionally the two countries most active in distributing oil revenues to less developed Arab states, no longer have deep pockets. They have been forced to search for credit in the international money markets to pay for the costs of the war. The war revealed social tensions in Middle East countries which lack democratic institutions. Michael Clare, an associate professor of peace and world security studies at Hampshire College, highlights these problems.
think the people of the Middle East see the United States promoting democratization very aggressively in Eastern Europe and in other parts of the world, and calling for human rights progress in the Soviet Union and Latin America and elsewhere, and feel that in the Middle East we don't apply the same kinds of standards, that we tolerate regimes that are undemocratic, that have very poor human rights performance, and form an alliance with a country like Syria, whose human rights performance is as terrible as that of Iraq. And we've seen in Saudi Arabia the gender oppression brought to the fore. So I think if we're to win the loyalty of people in these areas, we have to be more aggressive in our support of the democratic process in all of these countries and support for human rights.
Since the end of the war, the Bush administration has publicly called for the Kuwaiti ruling family to bring about democratic reforms. The recent announcement by the Kuwaiti government that elections will be held in October 1992 is a step toward reviving Kuwait's parliament, which was suspended in 1986.
If that is established in Kuwait, and if a couple of years down the road such a government emerges, it will be a very attractive example to the states in the region.
But as Ambassador Akins points out, other Mideast countries are resisting the changes which may become inevitable at some point in the future.
The Saudis aren't terribly interested in democracy at the moment, but even they are going to have to move in that direction. Absolute monarchy is not exactly the wave of the future, even in the Arabian Peninsula.
Fearing a quagmire like Vietnam, the Bush administration sought a decisive victory in the war against Iraq. It got a military victory, but the problems of the Middle East are proving enormously more difficult to deal with. The United States is likely to be embroiled in that troubled region for years to come. Like the burning oil fires of Kuwait, Iraq's invasion and the response to it will be felt in the area for decades. The consequences of war often turn out to be far different from what we intend.
I think that the important thing is for us in the future, it seems to me, that to build our policy on the basis of...
Be watching tonight at 9 on OPB as Masterpiece Theater presents a series encore, See Traffic.
That means is that we should not be frightened at the moment, it seems to me some are, about this demand for more representative government.